Welcome to the IISS. My name is Rahul Roy Chaudhary. I'm the Senior Fellow for South Asia and the head of the South Asia program at the Institute. This morning's talk and discussion meeting is on maritime security cooperation in the Western Indian Ocean, the initiative of the Indian Ocean Commission. This is part of a joint project on Indian Ocean security between the IISS and Oxford University, led on Oxford University side by Professor Dr. Kate Sullivan de Estrada, who's here with us today. As part of this project, the IISS has already held several influential events recently, including hosting jointly for the first time the UK's first Sea Lord and the visiting Chief of Naval Staff of India for a discussion meeting, organizing the first session on the Indian Ocean at the IISS Defense Ministerial Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore last year, with the participation of senior official speakers from India, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, the UK, and the People's Republic of China, and hosting sessions on Indian Ocean security at the annual Track 1.5 South Asia Security Conference held in Oman. The IISS is therefore delighted to host this important meeting today. This will be divided into two sessions. The first session will focus on the Indian Ocean Commission's initiatives in the Western Indian Ocean. This will have a key speaker making introductory remarks, followed by an interactive discussion session. We then break for tea coffee at 1100 hours, followed by the second session, focusing on lessons from the Indian Ocean Commission for maritime security cooperation in the Indian Ocean, again with a key speaker and a discussion session. After that session ends at 1300 hours, I hope all of you will join our two key speakers for a buffet luncheon in their honor, which is being held in the room next to this one. Let me now begin the first session on the Indian Ocean Commission's initiatives in the Western Indian Ocean. It may be a surprise to many of us, but sea blindness has been a reality in the island and coastal states of the Western Indian Ocean, whose development strategies had remained focused on their land area, ignoring, until recently, opportunities that could emerge from the ocean. Piracy was a wake-up call for countries of the Western Indian Ocean to realize the extent of various other maritime crimes and threats prevailing in the region. To elaborate on these and related issues, I am delighted to introduce our speaker for this session, Mr. Raj Mohabir. An economist by profession, Mr. Raj Mohabir works at the General Secretariat of the Indian Ocean Commission based in Port Louis, Mauritius, where he has been for the past 19 years. He holds the post of Officer in Charge of Economic Affairs with a portfolio of economic cooperation, trade, regional integration and infrastructure, blue economy, as well as maritime security. In terms of the latter, Mr. Mohabir is also the head of the Secretariat of the Contact Group on Piracy of the Coast of Somalia, CGPCS, which is well known to all of us here. Mr. Mohabir.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I'm not so used to be coming to such events, let me tell you, but thanks to the University of Oxford, Kate, and Rahul, in the context of this venture, what I understand is that it's very important for us to try to explain and give some more details about what we are doing. First of all, the first point I'll try to make is try to understand why maritime security should be of interest to the Western Indian Ocean countries. There are two reasons for that. First, you know that until recently, the development strategies and development agenda for many countries worldwide was focused on the land area. So any development activity, any economic activities was focused on the terrestrial zone that they have. And in the last decade or so, there is a thrust, very strong one, where many people are saying, and many countries now are saying, you know, we have to look at the ocean as the new frontier for economic development. Now, how can you ensure or tap from the sustainable exploitation of the oceans without ensuring that the oceans are secure? Secondly, many countries in the Western Indian Ocean region, Mauritius, for example, Seychelles, for example, but many, we all bear the brunt of all sorts of maritime crimes. Just look at the press, the media of Mauritius for the last few years. You'll see that drug problems are proliferating in such a very drastic way, and it's affecting the people, but not just. For example, you know that there are more than 5,000 tankers per year bringing something like 600 million tons of oil traveling through the region. You imagine what that risk is about. So this strategy of trying to tap from the ocean for new strategic development and trying to address these threats which are impacting very negatively on the countries, these are the two reasons why the countries of the Western Indian Ocean region they don't have a choice. They have to work together to see to it that maritime insecurity addressed. But there are also countries like Seychelles, and you've heard how Seychelles has been at the forefront of the fight against piracy. Seychelles claims that in the year 2010-2011, piracy impacted so much that it would even impacted something like the GDP decreased by 30%. So just imagine that. But then, how many of those countries can claim to really control their EEZs? How, when we're talking about sea blindness, as I was saying, if you're looking, for example, for Mauritius, the strategy for combating drug trafficking, it was since very recently concentrated on trying to look for traffickers in Mauritius. But these drugs, 90%, 95%, come from the sea. And the cooperation amongst the countries to see how we can tackle those were not there. So sea blindness is not something which is just, you know, it's in reality. And another example, just to demonstrate the issue of sea blindness, is that you look at, for example, fisheries. Fish is one of the most important marine resources that have been exploited since humanity. But if you look at, for example, the tuna, you have the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, you have 32 members there. And I initiated a study in 2006 which showed that the countries of the region, some a bit more, some a bit less, benefited from less than 10% of the proceeds of tuna. So, just to tell you that sea blindness is something that is very much apparent. Other point about the Western Indian Ocean islands is that, you know, most of the countries were ancient colonies. But how were they colonized? By countries which have very large maritime capability. But when these countries got the independence, most of them, if not all, they maintained the same structure for management of the oceans. These structures are not adapted to suit the needs of the limited resources of these countries on how to manage the EEZs. And you'll tell me, but well, you know, all these countries are signatory to many international conventions and close and other things. And I'll tell you, I have been looking at very closely at many conventions and the capacity of the countries to implement those conventions. You know how it is. In the international fora, who sets the agenda for those international conventions? What capacity does the countries of the Western Indian Ocean have to really negotiate a good international convention? But, you know, when something is negotiated, when you have to be in the good books. So countries sign. We have to be in the good books. But then go and look at how far each of the countries which have signed the conventions, they can effectively implement those provisions of the resolutions or conventions. Let alone the international convention. Look at the, for example, the measures of the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, just to manage one of the resources, tuna. You'll go and find many projects to try to build capacity in the countries in the region to implement those resolutions. So just to say that there are hordes of reasons why maritime security is at the same time something on which the Western Indian Ocean countries should work, but at the same time there are aspects and there are issues related to how far we can really get maritime security under control. Now this is from the perspective of the Western Indian Ocean countries. But the perspective of the international community, I mean countries which for some reasons have lots of interest in the region. Now, you know, I mean, this is nothing new, but that region, the Western Indian Ocean region, is the sea route for very, very strategic commodities. 40% of the oil, nearly the same percent of gas crosses from there. You have to ensure that this region remains secure. Is it? No. You also know that there are large amount of untapped natural resources in the oceans. We found gas, apparently one of the biggest stock of gas off the coast of Mozambique, and many countries have found oil, all sorts of metallic nodules and other things in the oceans. Now, who will try to exploit those? Who will try to be able to tap from those resources? Not the countries of the region. These are international institutions, companies who have the knowledge, who have the know-how, who have the technology to really tap from those resources. But most importantly, you know very well that that region is geopolitically and geostrategically one of the most active or complex in the whole world. Now, I won't go into the details, these things you know. But then, what the international community is doing about maritime security in the region. Of course, when there was piracy, the EU Naval Force came, the Combined Maritime Forces came, the independent deployers came. So all the big navies of the whole world are present there to curb down piracy. It's focused only on piracy though. But then piracy is suppressed. It's not eliminated. Everyone says that. The best experts say that. World Bank says the international committee is spending billions of dollars per year just to curb down piracy. But then what happens after? I mean, until when can we imagine that these forces will remain there to suppress piracy? The international committee also is trying to do something. We should acknowledge that. And this is the problem at the same time. We have found that there are something like 31 initiatives to improve maritime security. 31 initiatives, very few known. If I'd ask you how many do you know, I mean, maybe Mazi, the first one, is coming here to talk to you about it. But the rest are very small ones, small projects, small initiatives which are scattered over several actors, same players, same actors in each of the countries trying to absorb all the different. The effect of it is that it's not impacting positively on maritime security. Now, even if some countries are trying to do something, and for example, I know very well that there are many major nations which donates vessels, for example. I would say that these donations of vessels are like providing expensive toys to boys. Just imagine a big vessel going to one small country. Imagine the recurrent costs of that vessel. Compare it to how, for example, and I've been in the UK, I've been to the NIMIC, the National Maritime Information Center, and I've seen there. People are in a room. They know what's going on anywhere in the world. But with new technology, with know-how, with trained personnel, you can sit in an office and know what's happening there. Not with expensive vessels which cost millions and millions, which is dragging your resources away. These countries don't have that. Then this is what the international community is doing. So, in conclusion, the issue about maritime security in the Western Indian Ocean. Since the last 2 years, we've been working on trying to understand the level of maritime security or insecurity. What we've seen, reported cases of maritime events. Now, I won't say crimes, maritime events, but then we have analyzed those. It is in increase. Crimes also on the increase. This is reported cases. We have this center which has been established in Madagascar, which is working on that since 2 years. They have shown that 2017 to 2018, the number of maritime events, many of which are maritime crimes, have increased by 17%. Now, these are reported cases. And you know that no one knows exactly how many vessels are in the sea. No one is monitoring the zone. As I said, piracy is just suppressed, not eradicated. And I'm surprised also, you know, and this is what one of the issues that I mentioned while we started working on it, is that how come we leave kingpins untouched? From reports I heard that we practically know the kingpins, but until now, none of the kingpins have been, forget about arrested, but well, apparently there was one arrested, but he was left. But so, I mean, how come? How can we explain that the international community, with all the capacity that we have, the conventions and all this, that we have not been able to arrest a single and prosecute a single kingpin? So, but look also, and this is very important, look also the Western Indian Ocean region. Look at the countries surrounding the Indian Ocean region. Who expected, I mean, maybe those who are involved in analyzing the situation in many countries, they might be knowing, but who expected that there would have been terrorism attack in Sri Lanka? There is another island where things are brewing. Extremism is taking toll. Look at the situation in Yemen. Look at the situation in other northern area countries. But then, what do we expect in Somalia? 3,768 kilometers of coasts with a failed state. When do you think that we can, with all the support that is provided, we can think that Somalia will be able to control the coasts of Somalia? Now we go further down. Kenya, still struggling with terrorism. You go down in Mozambique, we have reports. So when you look at all this, see that the factors influencing maritime security are not necessarily in the positive area. And most importantly, those terrorism or extremist groups are using the sea for many economic activities. There are reported cases of, for example, charcoal trade, or many arms. Can you explain how arms go to certain countries? So, my point is that on maritime security, there is no one in charge for maritime security in the Western Indian Ocean region. I'm not talking about in any other area in the world. No one in charge. So we have to get someone to be in charge. And for me, the UN Resolution 1851 of 2009 shows that we can say, as I said, how many countries are controlling EZ? No one is controlling the high seas. So it's a no man's sea. And this is where I would like to now go on what we are trying to do. We're trying to, what we call, establish the minimal regional maritime capability to try to get the countries to work together in a way that the limited resources that they have and that they collectively try to establish this regional maritime capability. Not with big navies and other things, but with a different approach. We've studied the model of the EU, we've studied the model in Asia, and we've tried to come up with a new model, which is based on several principles. First, ownership and appropriation. If you ask me questions, I have only 25 minutes to talk, so I'll explain to you how and why when you're talking about ownership and appropriations. And this is the thing, for example, I was talking about, there are 31 initiatives in the region to improve maritime security. Most of them are not based on ownership and appropriation principles. Most of them are not based on how it will be sustained, how we can use the existing institutions, look at the real needs of the countries and the capacity of the countries to absorb. And more importantly, many are a top-down sort of approach. We're prone that we should have a bottom-up approach. We have to have an inclusiveness and openness. The system that we will try to put in place is not and will not and should not be a system of the Western Indian Ocean countries. It should be an international system. And this is where I think that the needs of the international community and the needs of the region should be met. And the plea that I'm making is, and this is one of the reasons why I have accepted to come and join and to talk to University of Oxford IISS, is to send this message. We need to promote this partnership and get the mechanism that we are trying to put in place, the architecture for maritime security that we are trying to put in place, to get the support and the collaboration of one and all. Stop working individually, separately. I do understand that due to geopolitical realities that there can be some national bilateral partnership, etc. It doesn't exclude that, but at least we can work out something. And I have been talking to some people about how it can be. So what is that we've done? First of all, we've led some very strong advocacy activities. Since 2009, I still remember then, my boss was Mr. Khalis Dofé, who was a Seychellois, and that was the time when piracy was hitting on Seychelles, and of course the region, and he told me, Raj, we have to do something about it. And my reply was, sorry, SG, if the UN can't do anything, if the big powers can't do anything, what the small IOC can do? I have a totally different opinion today. Totally different. All the regional economic groupings have maritime security in their agenda, including the AU, even if the AU is simply an agenda for the time being. And what we've done is we've worked at several levels. We've organized the first ministerial meeting. You know, we don't have a platform to discuss maritime security. That was why at one point in time, those who are involved in, Paul Mitcham, who is here, he knows about it, the previous chair of the IOC, of the contact group, wanted that the CGSPS platform becomes a platform to discuss maritime security and not be only focused on piracy, because there are so many interrelationships between the different forms of maritime crimes. So what we are saying is that we have to establish a platform, and the platform, I presume that since we started in 2009 in Seychelles to have the first ministerial meeting to get whoever would like to come to discuss, we've done that. Since then, we have had 5 ministerial meetings. And what we need to do, and we're working on, is to try to establish a coordinating mechanism. Stop the proliferation of different initiatives and projects, whoever it can be. And we need to maintain the momentum, and that's why the platform should be met regularly now and then, take stock of what has been undertaken. Not just have particular projects where we can then try to, draft, yeah, it has given some good results. But see to it that these are giving good results. And those should be able to be checked. Now, we have selected, and this is, we have done together with other countries in the region, we have selected 10 planks for maritime security, and we've worked that out. We are trying to pledge to development partners and trying to send the right signals to the international community and also to the kingpins, whoever they are and whether they are, and concretize partnerships. Now, what have we achieved so far? We've given, in 2010, IOC formulated a strategy for maritime security, which has 5 planks. If you ask me, I can tell you later what these are. And that was adopted by the 2010 Ministerial Conference. In 2018, we got the ministers from the region to endorse the architecture for maritime security. And we had also a declaration of the Western Indian Ocean countries. In 2019, and here I'll give you some what we can call as achievements. First of all, the fact that 2018 and 2019 we had ministerial conference and we saw the momentum, we saw the participation as active and as many or even more in 2019 means that everyone is interested. So we are galvanizing the mobilization of them. And out of the 25 statements that we got at the ministerial declaration, 6 came from the region, 7 came from regional and international institutions, 12 came from countries outside the region. For us, this is a major achievement. The second achievement is that in 2018, it was a declaration of the Western Indian Ocean countries. In 2019, it was a declaration of the whole meeting, where you had US, UK, France, Australia, Japan, China, India, all of them. We had something like 50 recommendations. And we believe that the international platform for maritime security in the Western Indian Ocean region is established. So we have to have it as a recurrent feature. And now countries are even wanting to have summit. Madagascar is launching, it was publicly known, and Mauritius is saying also 2021 will have a summit. So really get this mobilization momentum to go higher up. We have some planned activities, and I'll try to summarize this. As we said, we will be working at all levels with you, at national level. We are trying to look at how we can, not necessarily putting it that way, that we think that we should reform at national level the way countries are managing their EZs. This is too pretentious. But we have to achieve something. Get the countries to look the management of oceans a different way. We are working on that. We'll have to establish the minimal regional maritime capability, and we have 2 agreements that have been signed. 2 centers are being established. I don't have time. If not, I would have told you what these are about. But then we should continue to mobilize the international community. You should mobilize know-how, the technology to the countries, and ensure that this is sustainable. Now, we have already secured some funds for the next 2 to 3 years. I believe that we would need something like 10, 15 years to really get something strong established, and I'm optimistic about it. I told you in the beginning that I thought the IOC would not be there, but we are not. It's not an IOC architecture. It's not an IOC mechanism. It's a mechanism for the international community. We're just getting it done. And the call from me is that let's get the international community to work differently. Stop proliferation of different initiatives. And let's try to see how we can work together and promote this partnership. My aim with this workshop in coming here, as I said in the beginning, is to try now to go beyond our member states, to try to gauge, your adherence to the process that we have established. And I'm thankful again to University of Oxford and IISS. What I am working with them goes beyond to just organizing this particular type of workshops. What we are doing is with University of Oxford, and I hope that we will continue with IISS, is that the concrete system that we are trying to establish, that we will confront those precise, concrete processes with you, so that we get your views, how to proceed on. And hence also, and the other aspect of it is that how do we in this partnership promote research and development? You know, in our region at least, the research is done by universities and is kept in the drawers. Development is done by government and kept in the drawers. We have to bridge the gap. And to end, something, maybe it's too pretentious. I was thinking about it. I was saying that, after more than half a century that men walked on the moon, seemed to conquer the space, we are busy with border control and witness nationalism creeping against basic human values. I'm therefore not surprised that we have still not conquered the oceans for long-term benefit of humanity. We need to make the world great again and let nature take back control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohabir. I think it's been a fascinating presentation, and we at the IISS are delighted that you have been able to use our platform to send across messages in terms of the Indian Ocean Commission's priorities, its international engagements, and what you'd like to work towards in the future. And on that basis, I think I'd like to just start by commending the Indian Ocean Commission and you and your team for some of the initiatives that you've talked about recently that several years ago you thought would not be possible, but are moving forward on. And on that basis, I have several questions. I'm going to start with one question because I know there'll be others who'd want to come in to the discussion. My question relates to the nature of the international engagements of the IOC. I mean, the IOC, as we all know, is a small 5-nation intergovernmental organization. You talked about, I think very strongly you made the point that there is no one really in charge of maritime security in the Western Indian Ocean and some of the constraints in capacity terms of the IOC and its members. But you also talked about an international platform that has now emerged where countries like the EU, organizations like the EU, countries like UK, US, India, China, Japan are involved. My question is essentially, how do you see the nature of the involvement of countries like India, China, Japan, the US, and the UK? Because one can assume they have different priorities, they have differing interests, they have some competitive elements in the relationship. So as an IOC official who welcomes and would want increased involvement and engagement with the international community, how do you see these countries interacting among themselves and between themselves in relation to your objectives? And then we'll open up the floor for discussion.
Rahul, you gave me 20 minutes to talk about a very complex issue. And so I've been doing precisely what the 31 initiatives for improving maritime security have been doing, going very shallowly on top of many things, or most of them. Now, when I'm talking about the agreements that have been signed by 7 countries, and these agreements have led to the establishment of 2 centers. Now, one of the center will be a center where, with new technology that we are purchasing, thanks to the funding from the EU, the MASE program, within which we are getting this established, we will try to have an overall vision of the movement of vessels in a particular area that we've already defined. Now, that center will be hosted, is hosted by Madagascar, but then it will be staffed by liaison officers from the countries in the region, but also anyone from elsewhere. And this is where what I was saying, that because the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center will enable to monitor the movement of vessels in the whole region, and that the whole region, the oceans, are to the interest of the international community. So any country, UK, India, China, anyone can come and be working in the center, providing at the same time support for capacity on how the systems may work, and also at the same time, while doing that, those countries can also, for example, provide access to satellite imagery, for example, on a permanent basis. These things are very costly, and I think that for things like the understanding of the monitoring of movement of vessels may be something on which we can try to get not so expensive imagery to the centers. So here there are clearly several aspects of collaboration between any particular country interested in. And as I said, in one of the principles on which we are working is openness and inclusiveness, is that the system, the mechanism is not a mechanism for the Western Indian Ocean countries. The regional agreements that have been signed by the 7 countries makes provision for any international institution or country interested to be part of the system. So we are open to welcome any partner, but not just. The centers are not supposed to be centers working on their own. They're supposed to be working with other centers. We've already launched discussions with, for example, the Singapore IFC, with other centers. There are loads of international institutions with which we were discussing and trying to get that done. So,
thank you very much. Please raise your hand, and if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please identify yourself before doing so we know who you are and your affiliation. Antoine Levesque, yes, research fellow for South Asia, the IISS. I should introduce you.
Thank you, Rahul.
The mic will come.
So thank you very much. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about those centres, how they operate, and what really are the arrangements which practically you see coming forward. I've taken a lot of personal interest in how these have sprung up and how innovative they have been. Could you just go a little bit further on how important they will be?
Yeah, sure. As I said, we studied very carefully the European system, and until recently there was only one center for EU that was in Portsmouth, as you know, and now it's with Brexit, etc. So, and in fact, the center in Madagascar will be one where, with new technology, we hope that we'll be able to have information from the countries in the region, information from all sorts of, satellite imagery and other, systems, but also from the maritime industry, from others. That information will go there. And they will try to map out the movement of vessels. And what I understand, because the system is not yet there, what I understand is that the system will enable abnormal behaviors of vessels, like vessels stopping somewhere for 3 days or putting off, and then at some point in time you just see a vessels putting the transponder on, things like this. We do acknowledge that the system that will be in place from the start will not be the best of the, but then at least something will be there. And then there will be, there are already support staff specialized on understanding how these systems work. So there will be technicians. The centers have already, we have already had agreement with the host countries, Seychelles and Madagascar, but so for Madagascar. And Madagascar is already, and that's another point I'm making, is that already spending something like 200 to 300,000 euros on the centers by providing the venue and staff and several other supports, and it goes also true for Seychelles. Now, in the center, there will be liaison officers coming from the signatory countries, and also from other partner countries or partner institutions which have an interest or would like to. So there'll be a team. The governance of the center has already been worked out, and it is the annex of the two agreements. It's the same governance structure that has been made. And there is already what's called a steering committee of the signatory countries established. They have already met 3 times, and they are meeting now and then. Now, this steering committee will be overseeing the whole process of the work of the centers, where SOPs will be developed, the work, the way that we will be working will be developed. There is a director in each of the 2 centers, and the director will be working together with the liaison officers of the countries. And so we hope that the system, by the end of this year, we will be able to be operational. We've already concluded the contract in December last year for the acquisition of equipments to get the centers up and running. So for the time being, the center in Madagascar is getting information from the countries and from many other partners to try to get an overview of the situation, the maritime security situation in the whole area. But with the equipments, we will also have information which will enable us also to go deeper into the behavior of the movement of the vessels. And then what we think will happen is that the moment that the center in Madagascar finds something fishy, will immediately send the whole document or the whole situation analysis to the center in Seychelles. In the Seychelles also, it will be the same thing. The liaison officers from the country will be there. So a boat, a vessel leaving Djibouti, and the Djiboutian authorities think that there is something very fishy, this particular vessel, but we can't do anything about it. They will tell the Malagasy, you see, it's going to the Malagasy, or to Mauritius, or to Seychelles. So they will exchange information. And this will help to monitor that vessel, but not just in the region. In the past, without even having these technology, it has been the case in 2017 where a vessel was stopped somewhere in Europe. So it has to go and follow the vessel until its final routes. And the center in Seychelles will be coordinating any particular coordinated activity, coordinated actions at sea. So it means that when, for example, the vessel is going into the EEZ of Seychelles, then the center in Seychelles will get all the information, liaise with the authority concerned by stopping a particular vessel in the Seychelles EEZ, discuss with them, and agree as to the interventions for an inspection or something like that. And in case they don't see anything, and if they think that there is a need to continue monitoring that, they will do so somewhere else. So that's how these 2 centers are expected to work, and that's where I was saying that it is important that the liaison officers are not just the liaison officers from the countries that are signatory states, but also other countries interested to please come and join.
Let me just come back to you on this, Mr. Mohabi. I mean, what you've laid out, I think, is very effectively the issue of maritime domain awareness and the cooperation and connectivity that various fusion centers have around the Indian Ocean. But I was struck by the comment that you made that supply of petrol vessels, for example, are sort of toys for the boys, because in a way, you can have the surveillance, you can have the capacity development on these issues, you have maritime domain awareness, but how do you deter and how do you actually apprehend? And for that, you do need capacity, you need patrol vessels, you need, at sea capabilities. So in a way, I mean, I would have thought the two go together to enhance the paramilitary capabilities and capacities of the Indian Ocean Commission states. And I know countries like India have provided patrol vessels, as have other countries. So in a way, don't you see this being a parallel process rather than just a primary focus on maritime domain awareness alone?
I don't disagree with you. But until now, what do I see? I don't see progress in MDA. I don't see that. For me, and that's the question for any particular country in the whole world, is that you have to be very intelligent on how you spend the money. How cost effective is investment in management of oceans. So you have to invest where the returns are higher, not the returns are lower. So if a particular country, and you took the example of Mauritius, yes, Mauritius claims to have 2.3 million square kilometers of EEZ. And in fact, Mauritius has, in terms of maritime capability amongst the island states, of course, France, Réunion put aside, I would say the highest capacity. But then it will not be effective if you don't invest on MDA. Now, just to give you an example, Mauritius is 154 kilometers coast, and we have drug, cocaine, heroin, and all sorts of drug caught practically every month. Just last week, I think, or the week before, it was 95 kg of drug which came from the boat. The point is that if you really had a very good MDA, then how come these drugs get into? Madagascar is even worse. You have a whole loads of vessels full of rosewood coming from Madagascar, and it in fact, in the past, some years back, it was caught in Mauritius. So how can you claim that you're investing heavily on vessels, which, as I maintain, it costs a lot to maintain those vessels, and also to, as a recurrent cost, how many people are there, compared to focus on MDA. So I'm not saying that we do not need. Yes, we need. But what we need is to have a balance and see where the investment is best, where the cost effectiveness of investment yields higher and not lower.
Thank you. The gentleman here, if you could identify yourself, please.
Yes, hi, good morning. Peter Asprey. I'm a member of the Institute. Thank you very much, sir. Forgive me, I was late, so my question may have already been answered by you before I arrived. But and it's a follow-on from Mr. Chowdhury's point as well. And it's about fishing, and about the extent to which fishing and fisheries management fight against illegal fishing, helping island states manage and get proper revenue from their fish in their EEZ. To what extent is this initiative geared to provide tools for management purposes, either for international oversight level or for individual island nations who want to manage their stocks better, and to sort of bring it into focus? Take Madagascar, for example. I mean, if there was stuff going on in Madagascar's EEZ, which might be relevant to Madagascar this way or that way, what would prompt the fusion centre to respond? Would it require a push or an inquiry, a formal inquiry from Madagascar to look into this or that, or is it the other way around? Is it likely that the fusion centre will be operating under its own parameters, and when it sees things which might affect Madagascar, it will bring those to the attention of Madagascar, and then it would be up to Madagascar to use or not use it as they saw fit. Thank you.
There are several dimensions in your question, and I'll try to summarize it into two. First, you see, when you'll have the, I'll have to be diplomatic here. When you'll have the RMFC, the Center in Madagascar, I said that the system should allow to to monitor the movement of vessels, especially movement of abnormal behaviors of vessels. Now, in the center, you'll have liaison officers from all the countries with direct links to their national counterparts concerned by management of the seas. And in the center in Madagascar, they will see things. When you see already things and you have the capability to see much better than your national counterparts, even in the host country, then you're seeing things. Whether the country is prompting or not, it's changing the terms of the game. It's, as I said, I didn't mention it too strongly. We are not claiming, but it will prompt reforms, whether you want it or not. People will see things that are happening. And let me tell you, when I was at the NIMIC, I saw, not in the EEZ of the country, I saw in the territorial water in the country, some 10 vessels. And you check, it even shows how long they've been there. I'm not going to tell you more than that. You've got my response on this one. On the other point that you mentioned, fisheries. On fisheries, I'm a bit, I have some different views. On fisheries, we've tried at the IOC to prompt in, I still remember in 2001, I organized a regional workshop on surveillance of fisheries activities, 2001. 2007, we got a ministerial declaration of the IOC countries to do the surveillance. And from there, thanks to EU funding, we are establishing what we call a regional plan for fisheries surveillance, and there is the VMS systems and all that had been established there. What we think is that there is a need not to have a different tool specifically for fisheries. We have to use the same existing tools, and the agreements do provide not to duplicate tools for different types of maritime crimes, but to use the same. But there is another very important point related to fisheries management by the island states, and I have an issue there. Why do you have 32 members of the Indonesian Tuna Commission, but then the whole burden of the surveillance of the fisheries comes to the countries in the region? And even worse, funds which are supposed to contribute to the development of these island states are used to do the surveillance of the fisheries for the benefit, as I said, and I maintain, much more for countries not in the region but outside. The EU is providing support, so the EU is playing its part. The others should also. So the issue of sustainability of the tools, just to give you this example, is that, and this is where I think that the international community, it's the responsibility of the international community, given in its interest in the region, to contribute to establishing the architecture for maritime security in the region.
Thank you. Let me now turn to Desmond Bowen at the end there. Desmond is an associate fellow of the IISS and leads the IISS teams for our dialogues in both New Delhi and Islamabad. Desmond.
So thanks very much for the talk. I mean, I'd just make a remark, but then I'd ask a question. I mean, the idea of creating an integrated system for maritime security is enormously ambitious. And clearly the kind of foundation stone has to be intelligence or maritime awareness, but knowledge and understanding of what's going on. I understand that. But I mean, I just sort of, there's a kind of comment that I have about how much you can rely or look to other maritime areas and say some of these things already exist. I mean, you know, the Mediterranean isn't a great example, frankly. The west coast of Africa, I mean, where an enormous amount of drugs activity is taking place, not least, you know, pilfering of oil and so forth. I mean, you know, and the methods of bringing together countries to combat whatever it is that's going on, whether it's people trafficking or arms or other activities, tends to be ad hoc. I mean, it tends to be not established structures that are there for all time. I mean, you only have to think about piracy, you know, off the Horn of Africa. There was groups of countries, whether it was the EU or NATO or American, or as you say, independent-led organizations, you know, who sort of came together for a particular purpose. But so, I mean, I just sort of this is a remark about just how ambitious it is and whether there are other examples that you're kind of building on. But the question is about so enforcement and justice. I mean, I think enforcement at sea is something that's probably quite good for deterrent purposes. But if you think about piracy or you think about any crime, actually ultimately they have to be prosecuted on land.
Yep.
And so my question is about whether there are adequate arrangements for dealing with ships, which they largely are. There might be submarines, I suppose, as we've seen recently off the coast of America, but ships that eventually end up in a port somewhere. You know, so it might be in one of the Commission countries, or it might be in South Africa, or it might be in Kenya. I mean, to what extent are you satisfied that there are arrangements so that prosecutions can take place, that evidence can be produced, that, you know, that the sort of system can actually be brought to bear to bring pressure to reduce the illegal activity?
I fully agree with you. It's too ambitious. That's why in the end I said we are here. We do have a very clear picture of what we will be doing in the next 2 to 3 years, because there is the massive funding on which we've already agreed with the EU how we will be working. The EU is playing the game very well because it's left to the IOC to see to it how we work together with the countries on the basis of what is really needed to be done. So on that one, it's fine. But it is ambitious, and that's why I said that it is important for us to be looking at in 10 years, 15 years' time. So we're on the same page on that one. On the issue of lessons learned in other regions, yes, fully agree, but it is much more ad hoc. It's not really a very structured way on which, but this is precisely what we are trying to do. But to respond to the specific question on enforcement, we fully agree that we cannot be just establishing the whole system and then stop there. And that's why we are having very intense discussions with UNODC and Interpol. And this is where we are again saying, and I thought I mentioned it, that the international community should be helping differently. What do we see, for example, on certain activities? The US organizes, for example, like Cutlass exercises, okay? You have UNODC providing support for training of people, Interpol the same thing. But all these are theoretical. What we are saying is that let's look at the precise international legal frameworks, the national legal frameworks, and there is provision in the regional agreements that we would look how we can eventually, it's a big word, harmonize the legislations and come up with regional and maybe even push further about that. And this is a strong, I think I should say, this is a strong push that I'm making with Interpol and UNODC. And I've told UNODC, you've been able to get the countries in the region to prosecute pirates, which you can't do in Europe. Because that was the basis why EU put much effort in negotiating with Seychelles, with Mauritius, with Kenya, to try to get them to prosecute these pirates, because if not, they come here and then you give them, so it was done. So the international community could, and the UNODC, Interpol can support so that we go and complete the legal finish when there is a willingness. And this is what my plea is also. And this is where I'm saying, let's do things differently. Why can't we do it when there is rosewood that is being trafficked by, from Madagascar and others? And this is why we are saying that we should not be just restraining the agreements to the 7 countries as they are right now. I know that Tanzania is very much interested. I don't know too much about Somalia, but other countries like South Africa, as you're saying, looking at the major routes of maritime transport. So that's why it's important that this does not remain a Western Indian Ocean mechanism system. So yes, it is too ambitious maybe, I don't know. We should, and we don't have any choice. Let's see to it that we move forward on that. And I'm putting lots of pressure to Interpol, and you know Interpol. When you talk to Interpol, they know everything. I saw a project where 65–70% of the funds is just to pay for Interpol staff to go here and there. And the 30% for some of the activities, and even if they develop some tools, eventually those countries which would continue using the tools should continue to pay to Interpol eventually afterwards. Is this institution that we want to have and to thrive, and we solve these kind of problems? No. So it goes, and that's where I'm coming to tell that we need to get those institutions to think differently, to work differently. So if we can prosecute pirates, well, we should be able to prosecute kingpins. We should be able to prosecute any particular maritime crime criminal in any area. We should be able to do it. But we are not able to do. There is something missing somewhere. And this is where I think that this research and development is not just research and development, just to do some research and development, is also to see how we can get these international institutions, also some major big countries, to change and look the way differently in the interest of all.
Let me now turn to Commodore Anil Jaggi, the new naval advisor at the Indian High Commission. I hope, Commodore Jaggi, that this is the first of your many interactions at the IISS.
Thank you, sir, for introducing me, and it's a pleasure being in this August gathering, and especially listening to Mr. Mohabir. A very interesting topic. I had a very, it's a question which derived from what Mr. Chaudhary had mentioned earlier about the economics and finances of maintaining any initiative. Mm-hmm. So my point was, while you did mention that maintaining platforms by a country is an expensive business, but in my humble view, I think maintaining continuous maritime domain awareness is an equally expensive initiative, so to say. So my question to Mr. Mohabir was that, yes, you are putting centers in place, but I'm sure you would appreciate that maintaining continuous surveillance of a particular area requires certain key capabilities, which could be maritime aircraft, satellite surveillance, coastal radar chains, and which will have its sense of effect on the funding that you will require. So I'm sure there are plans on this regard for the initiative that you have thought about. Could you throw some light on that? And secondly, is there also understanding between the 7 nations about sharing of resources with regard to maintaining a continuous maritime domain awareness of the region? Lastly, in the present situation and condition that this initiative is, have you presently defined any extent up to which you are currently planning to maintain maritime domain awareness? Or are you seeking information from other information fusion centers such as Singapore or the IFC IOR, which has come up at Gurugram, India? And thank you for a very, very wonderful expose of the initiative that you brought out. Thank you.
Why MDA is expensive? You see? No. I know, but I'm raising it. Why? Why should it be expensive? See, I think we are reaching a turn in the context of development aid, and I'd like to come to a point that I saw in the preparatory meeting for the 22nd contact group in Copenhagen, where I heard that the support for example, the activities of prosecuting pirates and transferring them, etc., which goes through the trust fund, etc., countries have difficulty to provide the funds because the funds come from ODA, and ODA, some of the countries, and specifically Seychelles, is not eligible. Then I asked the question, who is in fact benefiting from the fact that the pirates are being prosecuted in Seychelles or in Mauritius or in Kenya? Who? Why your criteria for support changes at times? Now, in the context of the new, I would say, the new strategy, I'm trying to look for the word, for development assistance, ODA. I'm not saying that we should be relying on ODA fully. But if, for example, technology for maritime security remains an expensive business, and that it is in the hands of the private sector, and this is something which is very difficult, then of course it will be very expensive. So yes, it is expensive. We don't counter that. But I think this is exactly where we have to work on. How to make MDA become more affordable to those countries which really need it, in the interest of all. And this is where I was saying that if a particular country, India, is in the center, and the provisions are there, so that India, for example, tomorrow can be in the center, in both centers, but at least in the, I know that there is lots of interest to be in the center in Madagascar, then you could be there, but also providing some, in a way, and I'm not mentioning the specifics, about all these, to come to see that the centers be working, and some of the countries can have access to particular type of imagery or other type of things. So we have to work that out, I think. On your second question, this is the issue of the plan to be very frank with you, we have a 2-3-year plan, and these 2-3-year plan includes that the centers have the necessary equipments, staffed, and even all the expenses related to their running, but also for some coordination of actions at sea. So we have this sorted out for the next 3 years, including plans to discuss and work together with Interpol and UNODC for the legal finish. So all this is already worked out. Beyond that, we don't have yet. And this is where one of the point I'm making is that we need to get the international community to, instead of including or coming up with new projects, that to come to concentrate the efforts here and then look at the future ones. I don't know whether I respond to all your questions.
Or the coordination between the new Indian Ocean.
Yeah, no, this is.
In integrating and coordinating with the fusion centers.
Yes, all these are already in the plans. Already, in fact, we have a long list of, I think, 25 institutions in the region and even outside with whom we are trying to work out, look at individually each of them, and then try to establish cooperating arrangement, practical arrangements on how we'll be working and collaborating with all of them.
We have a few minutes left before the session ends, so we have an opportunity for 1 or 2 more questions, and we have the 2 people who could ask those questions, and I'll end with a final one. Let me first turn to Victoria Schofield. a member of the IISS, and an expert on South Asia. Victoria.
Thank you very much. I thought what you've discussed is fascinating. I would have loved a map, actually, just to be really specific on what area we're talking about and what countries. You've talked a lot about the international community, and I think it would be really helpful to really identify which countries in particular. You've talked about the countries that are benefiting, because when we just talk about the international community, it's sort of an amorphous, large community. So which countries would you specifically think should be responsible? And your concluding comment was, let nature take back control. What do you mean by that? Thank you.
Okay, which countries? Any country. You have an interest in the region? You think that it is important? Just come. See, in the 2 conferences that we organized last year and this year, we had US, China, India, Japan, Russia, EU, France. I mean, we had something like 30 countries, not just the countries in the region. So it means that there is interest. We are not selecting which countries. You think that there is an interest from particular country, door is open, come. Come, work together with us. But the system is expected to be transparent. Anyone wanting to come. But then don't just come to be in and then, you know, I won't dwell into the details. Come and provide some support. The collaboration should bring some value addition. But, you know, when you're coming here, because what will happen is that, for example, if tomorrow one particular country or international institution comes in, but then will be in the system with all sorts of information and analysis that will be done from information from here and there. But then what that country will bring in, this is a principle on which there will be some work to be done, and this will be in the remit of the signatory countries to decide, yes, indeed, we see value in getting this particular country as a liaison officer here with us, together with us, so we'll do that. I cannot say right now that one. On your other point about nature, well, see, in the discussion that we had on maritime security, we also saying, and it was in the conference last year and also this year, you leave, for example, the plastic pollution. And how far can we continue to think that we humans, we are, you know, we can treat anything in this world the way we want to, and that, you know, the nature will not react to it. I mean, it's much more philosophical. It's that we have to respect that instead of just fighting things that I mentioned. Yes, this is my nation. I will protect my nation from invasion, from immigrants from elsewhere. Fine. But then, who protects the world? Who protects the ocean? The point was, who is in charge of the oceans? I went to the conference of the UN, the first ocean conference last year. I think last year it was in June or something like that. And I intervened there, and I said that I don't understand why the UN doesn't declare all the UN office, the headquarters and all its offices everywhere, plastic free. No plastic bottles to start with. So
in line with the Commonwealth Blue Charter.
Sorry?
The Commonwealth.
With the Commonwealth Blue Charter. That's your thinking.
Not necessarily Commonwealth Blue Charter, but at least something saying that when you're talking about the oceans in our region, also we need to respect nature. But to respect the nature, we can't be just letting things go the way it is.
Let me take the last 2 questions together, gentleman there and then John. Yes, please.
Does the lady also want to? This lady. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Paul Mitcham, until recently part of EU NAFOR. Raj and I have known each other for quite a long time. Raj, I'm curious to know what role you really foresee commercial shipping taking in the plans that you have talked about this morning. And one of the reasons I ask that is not just because commercial shipping is, of course, an important part of the international community, companies like BP, Shell, Maersk, CGK, often, many of them have bigger turnovers than the GDP of many of the countries that we're actually talking about. But also because the whole success of maritime security centres does depend on the quid pro quo. You know, there will be some form of follow-up should shipping be threatened or attacked in any way. What's the incentive for them to get involved, and what role do you foresee?
John.
Yes, John Elliott, a journalist in India many years. Until Victoria mentioned it just then in passing, the Commonwealth hasn't figured at all in what you've been talking about. Has the Commonwealth got a role? And doesn't India regard the Indian Ocean as its bailiwick? So, and you've scarcely mentioned India. So the Commonwealth and India, what are their roles?
Okay. Are we taking...
Matt, do you want...
Yeah, I guess
Then we can...
Hi, my name is Marianne Owens. I am the research fellow for Chinese defense policy and military modernization, a country that likes toys for boys. My question is more about lessons learned from other IFCs that you are currently talking to and working with. What is something that has come out of those discussions that you think is either different in your context in the Indian Ocean, and what are things, practices, best practices that you think you can build on? Thank you.
Yes, all the three. Yeah, okay, thank you, all the three. I'll start with the last one, lessons learned from other IFCs. First of all, let's acknowledge that we are new. So, in fact, even if we are new, we have listed all the IFCs in the world, and we are establishing links with all of them, and we are discussing with all of them, and a specific dossier on each of them is being presented to the signatory countries to establish working relationship based on not just lessons learned, and there are people who are working on the lessons but also the best practices. For the time being, we cannot say that we are learning from experiences of and the lessons on the best practices. I think it's a bit too early for us to tell about that. But the process is there, that we will try to be learning with them, but also see how we can take the best practices and not continue or perpetuate the bad practices. Just to be sorry, I'm just trying to. The other question is the role of Commonwealth and India. As I said, the point that I mentioned, we are not specifically targeting one or other. It's open, really open. The agreements as they are is, yes, any international organization, any country can come, but then let's see when they will come, what is the value addition with the cooperation with that particular country or institution. Now, I have my views, of course, but it's not for me. I'm the secretariat of the whole. I mean, the 7 countries has signed, and I think I should say that the 7 countries have signed agreements. In the beginning, the IOC was spearheading the whole process, and the countries were following us. From the time the countries have signed the agreements, now the countries are in the governance structure at the top end, and we are now at the secretariat. So now we are working for them. But then, of course, we will continue on, and I believe that the next 2 to 3 years to come, we'll continue to provide this support around getting the process to be fully within the context of a good governance system until the 2 centers have developed their system. So, roles for the time being, if I tell you, it will be my personal view, but I refrain from saying that. I'm here on behalf of the 7 countries to try to say, come if India comes, and I know that India has already visited the regional center in Madagascar, and that there are some exchanges that are being made, and the day that the 7 countries will sit in India say, okay, let's work, and this is the way we can work. So, and I believe that there are several aspects which will be taken into account, and that the countries, the 7 countries, are really willing to see India, for example, being part of the system. So the willingness is there, including with the UK or several other countries, even the US, etc. Commercial shipping, again, I know where Paul is going to on this one, but let me just say that we have on our plan before the end of this year, we are initiating a study on the best conditions and the optimum conditions on which the shipping industry, the maritime industry, and the others can work together with the centers. We will initiate a study first. And I know very well, and I share your views. I mean, you didn't say it that way, but I fully agree with the point that it is very important to get the shipping industry to be part of the process. And we are giving prominence and importance to that, not just the shipping industry, but also other partners, the private sector in general. So we have the plan before the end of this year to list the priority components of the private sector with which we would need to really embark on real concrete discussions on the conditions that would lead to get them to be fully involved in the process.
Thank you. Let me end with the last question, and that is that you've understandably often talked of the EU and the EU's role in maritime security, and of course the seven-nation IOC. You are in the UK. The UK is going to leave the EU. You talked about NIMIC and maritime surveillance capabilities. How do you see the relationship between the IOC and the UK emerging in the next few years? And if there are one or two key areas of cooperation that you seek to focus on, what would they be?
Now, until the UK was part of the EU, then we would be talking to the EU. So, for us, when I went to NIMIC, it was like, yeah, okay, but that was, of course, there was NIMIC and also there was MSHOA. We went to both places. But I think that now with Brexit, I mean, if we can talk about it, with Brexit, I think it's much more important to get the UK in the process. As I said, there is no particular boundaries or conditions set. Any institution, any country is open to come and join and work together. And with the UK, I should tell you that, in fact, we didn't just visit the NIMIC, but we also had several training exercise and other activities that we did, not necessarily as IOC and UK, but IOC host countries of the centers and UK, so Seychelles, Madagascar, and IOC. And we are very open to continue this. The issue of Brexit is for us an internal issue between UK and EU, and this should not in any way affect us in one way or the other in trying to get this mechanism that we are trying to establish to be a success.
Well, Mr. Mohammed, on that diplomatic note about Brexit and the Indian Ocean Commission, I'd like to end this session of our half-day meeting on the Western Indian Ocean. I think it's been fascinating. You've been able to provide influential perspectives on maritime security issues in the Western Indian Ocean, the role of the IOC, the initiatives that frankly we were not fully aware of, and I think that's helped us improve our understanding of the geopolitical and the security context of the Western Indian Ocean. We will go into our next session where we'll build, I think, clearly from this session. And the next session, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, is titled Lessons from the IOC for Maritime Security Cooperation in the Indian Ocean. But that session will start in half an hour at 11:30. And for the next half an hour, we have a tea coffee break. There's tea and coffee served in the river room, which is just beyond this room. But before we end the session formally, I'd like all of you to join me in showing appreciation to Mr. Mohabir for being here today.